Seek victory today over the self of yesterday. Tomorrow, conquer your shortcomings and then build your strong points. Miyamoto Musashi was a legendary samurai who fought in several battles and won over 60 one-on-one life or death duels. Not just an accomplished swordsman, but also an artist, painter, poet, and Zen practitioner. What was Miyamoto Musashi like? What can we possibly learn from him? It turns out a lot. His writings, primarily focused on martial arts, offer practical wisdom applicable to many aspects of our lives. In this video, we will combine his teachings with biographical elements, trying to understand his words and also the man who wrote them. Any additional information provided is my interpretation, aiming to faithfully represent Musashi's teachings and make them practical for you. Any mistakes in this video are, of course, my own. Ice burned not death in the way. At the end of his life, Miyamoto Musashi went to a cave to meditate and reflect on his life. In those last 2 years in the cave, he wrote the Book of Five Rings, or in Japanese, the Gorin no Sho, which is his most popular work. Just days before his death, with his last breath so to speak, he wrote 21 principles down, which are called the Way of Walking Alone, or in Japanese, the Dokkodo. He wrote those 21 principles either as principles to follow for us or for his pupils, for example, or as self-reflective principles. In this video series, we will translate them as self-reflective principles, according also to Alexander Bennett's new translation of his works and also of his Dokkodo in the book The Complete Musashi. And those 21 principles will follow us through this video series, as well as some passages from his main work, The Book of Five Rings. A warrior like Musashi must have stood eye to eye with death many times. He didn't talk so much about the topic of death, but what he says carries weight. He spurred not death in the way, means he wasn't afraid of death. In all things, I never despaired over parting. The ultimate parting is the parting of life, namely death. We can't run away from death, it is the natural thing in life. Persons and things are coming and going in and out of our lives. This is a way of life. We can either fight against parting, which causes us extreme distress and in the end has, in most cases and especially in the case of death, no effect. Or we can try to live with the fact that the way of life is also parting and also in the end death, and trying to live with it and trying to accept it, which is of course also extremely difficult. I cared not where I lived. Miyamoto Musashi was born in 1582 and adopted at 3 years old by Miyamoto Musashi, who was a swordsmanship teacher. At 13 he had his first duel. At 16 the second one. Both enemies were skilled warriors and older. At 18 his first large-scale battle. At 20 he left his home to go on a warrior pilgrimage. The normal way for warriors was to find a lord, under which they then became a samurai. That meant they would teach their swordsmanship style and get a stable salary from the lord. Miyamoto Musashi chose the way of walking alone. Like he walked alone and didn't chose to find a lord. Even in later years, when he could be easily employed, so to speak, like under a lord employed, he didn't choose to, and he chose the status of a guest in various influential family homes. I steer clear of the path to attachment. While I don't think that relationships or attachments are in general to be avoided, on the contrary, which is of course my opinion, I find it fascinating to see a person who is walking alone and who was most likely satisfied with it. And I think this is a great strength, to be with oneself and to be content with it. Before we go on, what does Musashi mean by the way? In my opinion, the way is a path, literal or abstract, towards mastery and self-improvement. It is striving for excellence in the chosen path, striving to master oneself, our thoughts and our actions. 1,000 days of training to forge, 10,000 days of training to refine. After he left at the age of 20, he went to Kyoto, the capital at that time. At 22, he fought against the Yoshioka family, renowned for their swordsmanship skills. First, he challenged the heir of the family, Yoshioka Seijiro. Musashi won. Seijiro barely survived, put down the sword and became a priest. After that, a duel against Seijiro's younger brother ended in death for the younger brother. Third and final duel against Seijiro's son. Legends say that he was accompanied by many more men to take down Musashi. Musashi won. After the series of duels, he made a name for himself. At 23, he established his own school of swordsmanship and spent the next 5 years dueling more than 60 people. To become skilled, a master of any kind in any given subject requires time and practice. We can only imagine how Musashi was probably training every day from a young age to improving his skills. Theory alone is not sufficient, we need practice too. Musashi not only practiced in some safe environment, he fought literally life or death battles and had life or death duels, which could all result in death. I can't imagine how much he learned during those fights. Not to recommend it, of course, but in general, when we have something to lose, when we are exposed to a downside, as Nassim Nicholas Taleb would say, when we have skin in the game, we learn extremely well. In exercising my ideas of strategy, I have put my life on the line many times in combat. I have learned the way of the sword by risking everything in the divide between life and death. Be relentless in your study and be patient as you learn the virtue of all phenomena, utilizing every opportunity to accumulate actual experience. Musashi emphasized several times in his texts that reading alone is not enough. Reading has to be combined with practice. Simply reading these scrolls will not lead you to mastery in the way of combat strategy. Even though the concepts espoused here were written specially for you, do not think it is a matter of simply reading, learning, or emulating my instructions. Think of the principles as emanating from within your own heart and study hard to devise ways of embodying them at all times. In many places in his texts, he talks about the importance of practicality, the importance of pragmatic approaches. There are naysayers in the world at large who claim that studying the way of combat strategy is futile when confronted with the reality of battle. In response to this claim, I teach that the warrior must practice his craft in such a way that it is practical and functional in all things and at all times, for this is the way of combat strategy. In his time, there were many schools focused on show. Musashi takes the example of a flower and fruit. Many schools focus on beautiful techniques that let the flower bloom and look good. But the fruit, the outcome, is extremely small. What matters to him is that the fruit is big, that the outcome is big and practical. I guess we can transfer to our times. In many cases, our school and university education is not preparing us for real life. They are training us for taking exams. In many cases, of course, not in all. And in the end, we get a diploma to hang on the wall or something like this to show. But it's not really practical. And I think what we have to do, or like also transferring this to Musashi, we have to get practical. When we want to get good at something, we can't rely in the end only on some theoretical education, but we have to get into the practice. We have to do the things we want to get good at. To focus on practicality means in Musashi's way to be able to use many weapons, because we can't be sure when a duel arises that we have the ideal weapon in our hands. Because we have to also imagine when you are a warrior, your life is all the time on the line, and we have to be prepared for, or the warrior has to be prepared for all situations, and we have to also be prepared for all situations. Because in the end, what is important is to survive, and in the warrior case, to win. When I engage in a fight, I draw both of my swords immediately. If I only have a short sword and no long sword, then I will fight with that. If I do not have a short sword, then I will resort to using my bare hands. One way or another, I will be victorious. The way of my school is to win, no matter what. This is the ultimate focus on practicality. It is about surviving, or winning, and not about show. The warrior should avoid harboring a preference for any given weapon. Too much of one thing is just as bad as not enough. Transferring into our lives, there can be surprising situations in our lives where just one skill is not enough, or the skill we focus on training all our life becomes obsolete. That's why too much of one thing is as bad as not enough. And it reminds me of the man with the hammer, to which every problem looks like a nail. And that means when we just have one tool, can be a practical tool or also like a mental tool, like a mental model. When we just have one tool, let's say a hammer, every problem looks for us like a nail because we just have this one tool to solve this problem. And in many cases, this is then the wrong tool to use because there are so many different problems. We can't just use only one tool or one skill. Another important point Musashi often mentioned is to go our own way and excel in it. It is important for all men to perfect their own ways. He said that there are many ways: the way of the warrior, the way of the potter, the way of the poet, and so on. They are different but have commonalities. What is important? That we choose our own way and only concentrate on it and trying to perfect it. Do not imitate what others are using. Instead, take to hand weapons that are suited to you and feel right. We must choose the right thing for us. We have to play the cards we are dealt in life. We have to look at what are our strengths and what is possible for us and act accordingly. After turning 30, I reminisced on past experiences and realized that my success could not be credited to a true mastery of strategy. Thereafter, I studied ceaselessly from morning to night in a quest to discover the deepest principles. At age 28, he made his last duel against Sasaki Kojiro, who was an acclaimed warrior, until this point also undefeated. This duel changed something in Musashi because it was the last life or death duel he fought. As we saw before in this quote, he had some doubts about his successes. He realized with 30 that he didn't really understand the way of combat. Was it that the other schools were flawed, or was he probably just lucky? So with 30, he set out to fully understand the way. How Miyamoto Musashi continues his journey and what further aspects we can learn from him, we will look at in the next video. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, I wish you a fantastic day.